There's not a high level of corruption, at least that we know of.
Right.
It was probably a lot harder for the Milwaukee Mafia to be able to do things like that. Because it sounds like in Chicago, you could just walk up to any random guy and throw him a check, and he'd be like, "Yeah, what do you need done?" And I'll do it.
It's like, so in Milwaukee, it's like not unheard of. If you live in Milwaukee, you might know. If you don't, and you Google like corruption, bribery, alderman, something like that. I mean, even in the last couple of years, there was at least one, if not two, aldermen who got in some trouble for helping like strip clubs get licenses that weren't supposed to and things like that, which is a relatively minor thing, but still, like, it's not like you can't find a guy to bribe. It's on a much lower level.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons for that is Chicago historically, and I don't know if this is still true, but it could still be true, gave a lot of power to the alderman. The mayor was the top guy or person. The alderman had a lot of say over what happened in their individual areas. Milwaukee isn't really like that. Milwaukee is, the aldermen meet at city council meetings and they vote, and things are decided. Chicago, the alderman can make a lot of decisions without ever having to go through anybody else, as long as it's in their section. So if you're active in that part of town, and you've got a guy who's your friend or is willing to look the other way, you can get a lot done.
Yeah. And actually that makes a lot of sense too, because it would also make sense the alderman, maybe it's not anything that really Chicago does that gives them more power. It's just the sheer size of Chicago, because each alderman is probably covering a pretty massive range of space. Whereas in Milwaukee, I bet you an alderman, yeah. There's not very much space that they're covering because Milwaukee is just so much smaller. Yeah. So. Yeah.
It's just, the size, I think, really is the major factor. But, like, for listeners who don't know, we're sitting in Appleton right now. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you even know who your alderman is?
No.
Okay. I'm not surprised. But, I don't know who my alderman is either. So, like, it's not like I'm insulting.
I want to go with, like, a Tom Nelson, but I think he lost or something.
Tom Nelson's the Outagamie County executive.
I tried.
Okay. If you broke the law in your district, in your, ward, your alderman couldn't do crap for you. Mm-hmm. Like if you're like, hey, I'm going to give you $50 if you make this disappear. They can't do that. So it's very much a Chicago thing where they have a lot of say over that. In a normal city, your aldermen, they don't have any real power.
I would be really interested to see if is it because the way the government is set up in Chicago that it's different, or is it just the sheer vast size? By nature,
I think it's a bit of both.
The alderman gets more power.
I think it's set up that way because of the size. Right. I don't remember what they call the system of government there, but it has a name for the way it's set up that makes it so you don't have to clear everything on the city level. But anyway, this is all...
Yeah, we're going off on a tangent.
Actually, we're pretty much at the end anyway. This is kind of how things go at this point. Nobody gets in like any major, huge trouble. They do just kind of go around county to county, and they bleed them. They'll get fined $100 here, $200 there, these piddly amounts. But they keep having to bring them from county to county, which means they have to keep posting bond. It's just, it annoys the heck out of them. They always have to keep their attorney in hand, which is costing them money. It's killing their credit rating. It's giving them really bad publicity. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, like, their fines don't add up to a whole lot. They just were like, we're going to beat you until you are no longer going to be doing this.
So, but what do they end up doing with the people's mortgages? Do the people end up getting stuck with that, or did they do something to?
No, because anytime these guys are found guilty of the forgery, then the original people are off the hook.
Oh, okay. So they actually do go from, like you said, county to county, and sometimes they win.
Right.
Maybe not. Do you know how many times were they found guilty? Was it pretty much every time?
I don't know the total. This is the problem that I run into with this, is because my primary source, as usual, is the FBI file. And the FBI file follows this, but doesn't follow it super close because once it's determined it's not really a federal thing, they're only kind of sort of following it. Mm-hmm. And then when I'm looking into like the newspapers, the problem with that is because they're bouncing around from county to county. Some county newspapers are really easy to find online, and some of them have never been put online. I can tell you that they definitely went from county to county and seemed to be found guilty fairly often. Okay. But I couldn't tell you the total number of times that they went on trial and got found guilty.
Did you find...
Nobody went to prison for this. So I'll tell you, like, it really was just a series of fines. Yeah.
And it was probably because what they were actually nailing them for was all minor crimes, really, right?
I mean, ultimately, once it was all broken down, yeah.
I mean, granted, they might have gotten like 13 convictions of a minor crime, but yeah, it was still a minor crime.
Yeah.
And I assume at this point in time, this strategy did work, and we have no record of them ever attempting to do this again. This was the end of it.
Are you being sarcastic? Because they're going to do it again.
They're going to do it again, really? Same people or just the mafia in general?
Some of the same guys do it again.
Really?
Yeah.
So when does that happen? Is that...
It'll be a while down the road, but they do come back. They get smarter in one sense, I guess, because even though they're based out of Milwaukee, they seem to do it out of state.
Okay, so they start going out of state.
Yeah.
Trying to think of the advantages.
So the places they end up getting in trouble for it are like in Louisiana and Florida.
Oh, wow. So they're going really out of state then.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know why you're doing work in Louisiana and Florida when you live in Milwaukee, but that's what they end up doing.
I wonder if it's just like they had like a storm there and they were just desperate for workers.
Maybe that could be.
So, you know, like a hurricane hits somebody and all the contractors flee to that place because they
hadn't even considered that, but I bet you that's a good way to get money.
That's a good way because people are desperate and stuff like that. So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, some of these guys will try it again.
The other thing I would go to is law. The laws in Louisiana were somehow different that made it easier to get away with. I don't want to sell any mafia members short, but they just don't seem like they were really that smart to approach it that way.
No, like I'm often surprised. This scam clearly worked for a while, and they were able to, you know, when you add it all together, it was a significant amount of money. They didn't seem to do a very good job of making it so it wasn't really obvious.
Right.
It traced back to them once somebody figured it out.
And I go back to like your toy thing too. Remember the toy episode?
Yeah.
That was a good scheme. I mean, that was a thought out legal scheme, but it was done in the simplest possible way. You know, they could have added just a couple more layers into that to make it a little bit harder to trace what they were doing. But it didn't seem like they really put much thought into it. They just like, well, we could do this and that would be easy and we'll eventually get caught, but we'll deal with it when we get caught.
That seems about right. But anyway, that's pretty much it. Like I said, if people are really interested in this story, you can go online, you can check out the notes, and it gets into more of the detail, like it names all the other salesmen. I tried to not throw that many names in here. It has the other salesmen if you're curious who they were. It mentions some of the people who were scammed out of their mortgages and things like that. I didn't skip anything in the notes. The notes are completely thorough. It just doesn't make for very good podcasting to actually be like, this one was 3,000. This one was, nobody cares on that level. But if you do, if you're that person who does, I put it out.
Interesting. All right. Well, I think with that, we can wrap this episode up. As always, we do have a Patreon. You can find that at patreon.com/Milwaukee Mafia or go to MilwaukeeMafia.com and find it there. And this month, we did have an uptick in people subscribing to the newsletter. So
good.
We do have a newsletter too. Just easiest way to find that is just go to MilwaukeeMafia.com and open your eyes. You'll see it somewhere. It's everywhere. Get signed up for that, and we will be back next week with the Patreon episode, and in 2 weeks with a regular Mafia episode.
Hold on.
And Gavin's got something.
I got one more thing to add. I want people to know. I want this to be very clear. The monthly newsletter.
Yes.